The first thing I want to share is that dragons in the West are often associated with like chaos and destruction, very negative stuff, but much more peaceful in the East. I went on Wikipedia, etc. And so the first thing, we already talked about this many times. So right now we're in Japan, we're traveling, etc. And there's this thing that dragons are very different in the West, in Europe, for example, with Asian dragons, let's say.
Yeah.
And so I just went and started reading a little bit about that. And turns out there's many more types of dragons as well in many different cultures. And as you said in the video, there's many different cultures all around the world that never had any connections between themselves. And you still come up with the idea of dragons, or at least something that we then qualify as a dragon. So that's interesting. And so the first thing I want to share is that dragons in the West are often associated with like chaos and destruction, very negative stuff, but much more peaceful in the East. And so in the East, it's much more symbols of power, strength, good fortune. There's also like water dragons and all of these different things. But the interesting thing was just like how different it is, because like in the East, it's more about like benevolent creatures, prosperity, harmony, and all of that, right? But always reptilian, always like snake-like features, so they always have like long body, scales, either venom or fire, and sometimes many heads, and always very powerful, etc. One interesting thing I didn't know is that, and when you think about it, they're always guarding something, or they're always in an important place. You have to go defeat the dragon to, so sacred, they're in, temples or sacred trees, paradises, rivers, underworlds, or something like that. Never in a random place, But it's true that at least all the different myths, or even just movies or whatever with dragons that you can think of, they're never just like a random animal. They're always like important and big, and they have a big place in the story. They're always like demons or gods or ancestral spirits or wise guardian. Like they're important, And then for the ancient African dragons, there's many different ones, but the one I liked that was crazy is from like South Africa, and it is called Grootslang. So it's a big serpent from South African mythology, said to embody overwhelming power resulting from an ancestral splitting of an elephant and a snake. So like with an elephant, like it kind of makes sense that you have myths about dragons all over the world. And it does kind of make sense. And it's just, I was surprised because I knew already a little bit about like Eastern dragons and Western dragons, but it makes sense that there's dragons all over the world. But the interesting thing was, just those commonalities, because like in pretty much all these different places, so pretty much all cultures around the world have some myths about dragons. And when you talk about dragons like big serpents or big something along those lines, they're always important. They're always protecting something important. They're always at an important place. They're never just a random animal. Conclusion, dragons all over the place.